A year and a half ago, I came to a crossroads professionally and asked myself what I should do with my life. The answer that came was to cultivate the states of deep inner contentment that I had briefly experienced in life and support others to do the same. Looking back, these early contented states appear to have been glimpses into the joy of pure being, where contentment was not dependent on any external factors. Committing to do this as my path and profession allowed me to dedicate myself to my inner journey and to supporting others on their own journeys earlier on the path. I am not working directly with the unfoldment of anyone's kundalini, but rather working with people to connect more inwardly and identify their own purpose, path for the current stage of their life. A few days ago, I went for a walk and asked myself what I was really doing with this. And the answer that arose was, I am the embodiment of the creative force of the universe, becoming aware of its greatness and unity, and reflecting it to other parts of myself. I'm sure your Kundalini course has played a large part in the subtle emergence of this perspective, so I'm grateful. However, I do not want to cling to the perspective and let it condense into something gripped intellectual identification. But it is nevertheless useful to refer back to when I get lost in my day-to-day dealings. I'm trying to remain as vigilant as possible to make sure this work is coming from an authentic and natural place and does not become an ego trip. So I would be thankful for any guidance you may have, especially given that you were reluctant to teach initially. Questions. Can we support others on their early journeys before we have culminated ours? I feel like there is a place for the early work of introspection, identifying one's values, aligning with them, etc., which lays the foundation for the deeper teaching around our true nature and purpose to emerge. That is how it worked for me, at least. And the second question, is the proper perspective to take while supporting others on their journey, seeing oneself simply as an embodiment of the creative force and letting it express itself as naturally as possible? So it's fairly straightforward here, very simple. Just asking here, can we support others on their early journeys before we have culminated ours? When it comes to the term supporting, or can we support, of course it's obvious, it goes without saying. Why does that even need confirmation? We support anything and anyone, whoever we may come across during that time. Sometimes it's by just simply sharing something, lightheartedly. At other times, pointing out. So this is something that I would say, yes, absolutely. It's not a rocket science. But you just need to be aware that there are certain intricacies involved when it comes to guiding others. So I could even see how attentively you have put your inquiry here. You have said it twice in your background and in your questions. In the early journeys. So in other words, you're pointing out that you're not guiding somewhere in the so-called ultimate stages. So you're kind of making it very clear. So you're supporting someone in the initial, early journey before we culminate ours. So this is an interesting something for you to ponder on. And I'll leave that to you and everyone, whoever is partaking in this. I welcome you to take what feels fitting without kind of jumping on or jumping into any conclusions that this is in fact a universally applicable perspective. This realization, of course, to be of help to others is, I would say, even natural, organic, spontaneous outcome of what we go through in life. How it will pan itself out, of course, depends a lot on several factors. Some of these factors we touched upon in the Kundalini course when we talked about the way Kundalini itself unfolds, because this also is related to the sum total of where we were prior to that initial impact of awakening that we speak of here. Whatever that was, let's say, a motivational force, that will color the process. And that will issue also a particular way of its unfoldment. This is true to the clinical, true to the classical perspective. Questions often asked and could be asked, what about those for whom Kundalini awakened as a result of just out of the blue? Not at all knowing nothing about it, not even considering. So in other words, it wasn't the result of a great compassionate wave of, towards humanity, uplifting others, or a great wave towards like that unnameable, unknown power there that may be spoken of as the Godhead, the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality. What if the awakening took place just as a so-called accident, just that, something happened? Well, that too falls into that category. It also has a specific quality to that. In the aforementioned cases, there are 5 classically spoken cases, by the way, how it can pan itself out in that way where this will render and color, render the process, so render the individual and color the process along the way. Those in whom awakening took place as maybe a result of anything from psychedelics to deep trauma to deep loss, anything that may be as a result of some kind of practices when one was not even doing why one is involved in these practices, then that also will color the process. Most likely for those who have woken up out of the blue, a lot of confusion would have to be dealt with. And that persistency of confusion there is a big, big part. Because there will be this constant, what she wants from me, or what is happening to me. I'm going through this. I've no idea. I don't understand why it happened to me. I've never asked for it. And a kind of dialogue, you see. That in itself is symptomatic to that particular awakening. It's that spontaneous, unasked for. So quick catching up would be required. If person is smart, here talking about in full spectrum of what it represents, then that being will quickly look for ways of finding valid answers. Sometimes inquiries are so lame that they're just like almost one wouldn't even know where to begin. It's like, I've had this and that, career, job, car, wife, blah, 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 right? And then suddenly I'm awakened and all this is now shattering. I don't want it. Can I go back to my, my career, my position, my job, my car, my girlfriend, I still have an amazing collection of ties, guys. Amazing collection of ties, you know? Ties, I'm talking about ties. Have you ever seen me wearing a tie? I don't think you did. I have an amazing collection. Designers who no longer exist, who won't bust. Christian Lacroix, you know, Kenzo, authentically designed by these designers, you know. Jean-Paul Gaultier, you know, amazingly beautiful ties. I can't throw them away, nor can I give them away to lawyers or business people because they're too flamboyant to wear at work. You see? I'm waiting for Christmas where I can wear it. Tomadata suggested do next Christmas in Mexico. We're not going to wear tie in Mexico. You see? So maybe one day the inspiration will come and they'll can do something with these ties. You see? So I cannot lament, oh my God, what the heck this Kundalini doing to me? I have this collection of ties I have nowhere to wear now. I mean, this is literally inquiries of the kind come. You know, I have an amazing things here to do and wear and do, and suddenly I cannot do it because A, it's not very nice when something holding my neck. I want to take a t-shirt and my skin off, let alone being tied like a dog on a walk, on a leash. So, this all, not to depart too far from what you have brought up, and bringing this, clarity is required. What are you guiding people in early journeys? Are you sure that early journey is not as important as later journey? That is a very important understanding. Every tutor, every teacher, in the kindergarten, teacher may have more important job than the one in the university, because in the kindergarten, they give our kids something that in the university is too late. It's too late. You know, when you go to study high maths, you know, some sciences, creative writing, it's too late. But when your 2.5-year-old goes to that kindergarten lady, you know, is she somehow an underdog in teaching? Is somehow she's less important because, you know, after all, they all toddlers there. You need to answer that question yourself. And at the same time, I would say something which will paradoxically present you with an interesting opportunity as well. No true spiritual integration is actually possible until we begin to reflect back that what we truly have learned, understood, went through. In fact, behind the scenes, among the peers, often those who come across as know-it-all, right, that kind of armchair know-it-all, like, you know, can sit endlessly, write blogs, and I can explain you the highest concept in writing. Come and sit in front of people. It's a totally different ball game. This is where you will know whether you really know it. This will be final phases of your own growth into full integration of that what sort of seems already totally clear and has no doubts whatsoever left to tackle. So in a way, sharing and supporting others is part and parcel of the process of that what we speak of here. And at some point, we will be faced with this possibility. Not all of us, but some of you will. And for those of you who will, you might remember and recall this, maybe already now, this may sound relevant, that what was considered to be super clear, soon as you sat in front of others and the inquiries addressed to you, where all that clarity suddenly fizzled. Oops, and then the rubber hits the road yet again. Then it's a totally different ballgame. And of course, goes without saying, there are plenty of those who take the bull by the horn and very often do this in the way of simply having it in them, being ballsy by nature, ambitious, very ambitious. I've seen that very closely, in fact. Some of these people I actually just knew them, we were on good terms, and how far they went and how far they took this role way before the process had the chance to complete in any of its culminative phases. Way too early they formed international following. Narrative had to be created. Something that went innocently into the making of that had to be rewritten and hidden. Why? Because this all start to get intermingled with the territory of it being a narrative, the job, the CV, the adulation, the following, the way, you see? So in other words, there's a lot of psychological maturity is required to guide others, because one would have to be vigilant at all times, 24/7. With that vigilance, honesty is required. Because if we vigilant, but then somehow allow ourselves, well, yes, I can see that, that shit hasn't been quite yet cleaned, hasn't been quite tended to, but it's all right, it's okay, I don't think anybody can see it anyway. I'm so convincing otherwise. Obviously, this cuts the chances for real refinement. This is why it's not a straightforward answer. So on one hand, I would say, yes, of course. It is your job, everyone's job, is to share this, whenever one feels called especially. But you need to be aware of all these repercussions, of all this, what it inevitably is accompanied by, and often can be kind of boomeranged, because then it will be nearly impossible for stepping out of these shoes. I mean, I used to tell this example, a great example of a Sufi sage, Al-Ghazali, who forsake it all, position of the great teacher at the court of the, in Damascus, which was the capital at the time, of the great ruler. And he held weekly gatherings there. And he was held in great esteem by the community and by, of course, those who consider themselves to be his students. And one day when he went to speak, his tongue stuck in his mouth and he could not utter a word. He was married, had position, job. I mean, I can't imagine, translate today, he is like, if in the United States, position of a senator. In Vatican, position of an important cardinal. In any other kind of, just give any other analogy. Fame and name and all the rest of it. And in that realization that he cannot speak, speech stuck in his throat and the tongue would not move. He struggled for a moment, but he realized there and then that this is the alignment is taking place. Everything that he spoke before spoke purely from what he thought he knew, where in fact he spoke from understanding on that mental, intellectual level. So the speech that wanted to come from a deeper dimension of reality could not proceed. So he was choking with his own words. He excused himself and hastily left the assembly, got back home, spent a quiet evening with his wife and children, packed his bag when everyone was asleep, and bid everyone farewell in the morning, and became a wandering dervish for many, many years, because he gave himself a promise. He will not get back until he knows it directly. Legend or not, it is recorded, but it's a telling example of a great being. How many of us can afford to do this? Teachers today teach speak, it's like they come from a place of understanding 2-3 sentences, understanding ideology of non-duality, and they create following. I call it trifles. It doesn't matter if you have 10,000 or 100,000 of followers or 1 million of followers. Who cares? Yes, it may translate immediately. Imagine how difficult that is for a person in the position of that authority when faced with real calling of the spirit to leave it all behind. So Al-Ghazali stands as a colossal figure there of that reminder that what matters most is truth. And of course, legend goes that when he finally woke up one day in, all kind of like in rags and the bed made of autumn leaves, he had the carriage there. Some peasant was passing by on his mules or horses, on donkeys. And in that very moment, the fullness of that came into his heart. He shook his leaves and went all the way back to Damascus to announce himself here. And of course, it was like he was met with great surprise, and from there on, the real teaching of Al-Ghazali unfolded. So this shall serve you as the inspiration and warning. That's all. Other than that, there's nothing wrong, and it's part of the process. You see? So it is for you to draw the line. It is for you to understand what it goes into guiding others. And I haven't mentioned anything in the relation of karma as well. So therefore, to finalize this response to you, I want to tell you there are some safety valves. Because sometimes so-and-so who have been with me as a student, right, as a companion on the journey, comes and like, I want to forge my own kind of, I just want to go out, I want to teach now, okay? And I'm not your adyashanti who make them as baked cakes, just because they woken up, start showing some signs of awakening, and they were invited to teach. Some of them definitely worth their salt, like Bonnie Greenwell. These are very, very, very solid names in the field. But many others were totally, totally raw and green and sour and, So therefore, I'm known for many, many times dissuading anyone who wants to jump on this first thought. So my suggestion always, find modality and work through that modality. So in other words, it's nothing wrong in being in your process and offering some kind of therapy that you are feeling affiliated, feeling close to. For example, for me, when I was going through the process, offering pranic healing was part of the natural process where there was so much of that pranic currents and so much prana oozing out of all my pores that after several spontaneous cases of recoveries, some accompanied by complete remission of this or that, which was otherwise would require chemo and radiotherapies. I had to consider it, and for a number of years I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I went and learned the ethics of modalities, because when you start working, you need to know certain do's and don'ts, certain rules and regulations that come to that job. So therefore, I always say, whatever modality may be there, it will be like safety container for you. This modality can be creating works of art, singing with the intention of healing, making cups that are filled with that vibe. I'm just saying that modality carries that. Same way you can work with people in that chosen modality. That's easier than suddenly being in that space of guiding, but guiding how? What? So that's my reflections on your question, okay?